Everyone can see that okay? Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. My name is Justin Reed. I am a senior program manager with the Charlottesville Area Community Foundation. Today, we're going to be talking about two of our new grant programs. We have a dozen of different grant opportunities. And so today we wanted to just highlight and do a little bit of a deeper dive into the latest addition to our large number of grant opportunities that we offer. We're going to be talking about the SUN grant, support for sudden and urgent needs, and our solidarity grant. So maybe we can go to the next slide. All right, so I think most of you may know our programs team already. They are on the call, and we will all be available to answer questions during today's lunch and learn. We do ask that you hold your questions until the break. We have a couple of breaks scheduled during the webinar. In addition to myself, we have our wonderful director of programs, Ebony Buggs. We have Alex Gross, who is also on the call, and then we have Megan Donovan. And so I'll begin today's conversation, and then we'll have our break. And then after the break, Megan will pick things up and go into a little bit more detail about the technical aspect of our brand new grant making application system. And so again, hold questions until the break. You're welcome to type questions into the chat as they come to mind, and we'll be sure to get to them a little bit later. All right, so we wanted to begin today's talk by being fully transparent about our grant making process. I am very relieved to say that I'm not the one that has to make the decision. We have an incredible group of community members who are going to be involved in helping to review the applications. And so this chart right here basically breaks down the process for both the Solidarity Grant and the SUN grant, Sudden Urgent Needs Grant. And so if you look here, they begin pretty much the same. We'll receive the application on our end, and then each of those applications go to our Community Advisory Committee. Our Community Advisory Committee, again, is made up of representatives from our various localities, and they will be kind of the first point of review for the applications that we receive. And so you'll see here, there is a slight difference in what happens after the CAC review process. And so if you fast forward on to this kind of enlarged orange stage, you see here, it says approved, design process, not approved, approved, not approved. So with the Solidarity Grant, because we're anticipating much larger and more complex proposals, there are more options when it comes to potential outcomes. So our Community Advisory Committee could potentially say this is an approval right away. They could say they recommend reject, or this middle category here, which you don't see in the SUN process. Solidarity grants could potentially move to design stage. And when we talk about design stage, this is something that it isn't a reject, it isn't an approve, but it is something that has a lot of potential, but it's incredibly complex. And we would like to bring together the partners involved for an in-person design meeting. And so this is where we're bringing together, all of the folks who were involved in developing the proposal and sitting down and actually kind of hammering out some of the details and making sure there's this cohesion and clarity around what exactly is being done. Something that might trigger the design process, for example, is if we get multiple proposals from different grant partners and everybody is kind of proposing to do the same thing. We might say, wait a minute, this warrants a design meeting. And so we pull all of those partners together to see if perhaps there's an opportunity for everyone to do a cohort style funding proposal where each of these partners are collaboratively working together to address the issue. And so the design process for us is very rare, but we do want to make sure that, you know, if we do enter that phase, you all are you know, completely aware of what that entails. And if you go to the website, you'll see that there is a PDF document that kind of outlines the types of questions you might see during a design meeting. So the CAC will, again, make those decisions, and then those recommendations go towards our board for final approval. Our board has fiduciary responsibility over the organization. And so they will accept the recommendations from the CEC and then vote to allocate that funding. We can go to the next slide. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, and I assume you're on this call because you know the two grant programs we're going to be talking about. We're going to start off by talking about sudden and urgent needs, and then we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about the Solidarity Grant Program. We feel that the SUN program is pretty straightforward. As we mentioned at the grants update meeting, both of these programs come out of a period of considerable listening and responsiveness on the part of the foundation. We've heard over the years that this type of opportunity was needed, and so we've tried our best to meet that demand. And so the SUN grant program is focused on these unexpected funding needs, things that are perhaps an emergency, but don't rise to the crisis level that we saw, with the pandemic, but is an emergency nonetheless. These are things that are unexpected, and the organizations is attempting to respond to this unexpected need or a rise in need that's experienced here in the community. And so there are a couple of things that make the SUN grant distinct. One, these awards are capped at $10,000. We also want to make sure it's clear that these applications are accepted on a rolling basis, which means you can submit, continuously, and we will have a relatively quick turnaround time. We're aiming for 30 to 60 days from submission of a SUN proposal. One thing that is also worth noting with the SUN grant is that you can only apply once a year. And so just remember that as you're considering a SUN, this grant does have a restriction in the number of times you can apply. And so we're limiting it to once per year. We can go to the next slide. So the Solidarity Grant Program. And so we're going to do a bit of a deeper dive here, because I think this is the one where we're anticipating the most questions. So with Solidarity, we are focusing on racial equity movement building. And we're focusing on racial equity movement building that's led by those who are most impacted by inequity and injustice in our region. So a couple of things to note here with the deadline. Like SUN, Solidarity also has a rolling submission. So you can apply repeatedly at different times throughout the year, whenever your proposal is ready. One distinction is that for Solidarity, decisions are made quarterly. We anticipate these grants taking a little bit more time to review, and this is going to be a decision that you see made quarterly based on our board meeting calendar. Another thing that differentiates Solidarity from SUN is that we do accept repeat submissions. So again, whereas SUN, you can only apply once a year, with Solidarity, if you submit a proposal and it isn't funded during that first quarter, you can reapply again during that next quarter or at any different point during the year. And then the other key difference is around the award amount. So with the SUN, we're capping it at $10,000. For Solidarity, the total award amount varies. And there have been some questions about what is the cap, even though we say the cap varies. The answer to that question is, ask for what's needed. I think that's the best answer that we can provide. There is some flexibility on our end when it comes to the amount of resources that we could allocate for any given proposal. So more than anything, we want realistic asks that reflect what's needed, and then we'll work to meet that need. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So another question that we're anticipating, and we've tried to spell out in the guidelines, but want to highlight here, when we talk about racial equity movement that's led by those who are most impacted by racial inequity, this is how we're defining it. And so you'll often hear us use the term ALANA, and I think for some people, you may be more familiar with BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color. Right now, we are using the term ALANA in order to capture the nuance and the complexity that is often found within that POC at the end of BIPOC. And so you'll hear us often say Black and ALANA. And when we say ALANA, that first A is African. The L is Latine, or Latino, or Latina, or Latinx. The first A is Asian. The second A is Arab. Excuse me, I need to figure out how to not see the alerts, because I'm seeing the questions as they pop up, and then my mind is going to the answer, and then I'm trying to. I think I figured that out. Hold on. I think I figured that out. All right, let me just focus on the slide here. So where was I? So African, Latine, Asian, Arab, Native American is what the ALANA acronym stands for. And when we talk about ALANA-led, again, thinking about racial equity movement building, first of all, the work has to be focused on racial equity. And so I think that might be a question that we often hear. We're looking at organizations and groups and initiatives that are focused on closing some type of racial gap that we're seeing in outcomes in our community. And so when we talk about an initiative being led, we're talking about the executive director or equivalent, the majority of staff. If it's a volunteer organization, then we're talking about the majority of the volunteers, the board majority, or the project team. And so if the organization itself is not ALANA-led, Black and ALANA-led, but the team that is carrying out the work and focusing on a specific issue or project is, then that proposal is still eligible. And then you see here potential uses. We did have some restrictions on SUN. Solidarity is an unrestricted grant program. And so there are many different ways that this funding could be utilized. The only thing that we ask, you see here in the bottom, requests for capital campaigns or reimbursements, we ask that we have an additional conversation around what those needs look like. And so you can see these are just a small example of the different things we anticipate funding going towards. All right, go to the next. So when we talk about movement building, really the two key components of movement building that we're really trying to pull out is the power sharing and building and transformative change. It's important to recognize that the Solidarity program shouldn't be a request for a quick solution or an emergency relief type effort. We're looking for proposals that are trying to transform systems, that are implementing change that has a long-standing impact. This idea of transformation is something that I think really differentiates the Solidarity program from the SUN, whereas SUN, again, it could be an emergency relief type effort. For Solidarity, we're looking for work that goes beyond a quick fix or a really short-term solution. You know, when we talk about movement building too, something that's critical for this work is looking at the partners that are involved and ensuring that it is a diverse coalition of groups and entities that are involved in addressing. We know that a single organization can't transform an entrenched injustice or inequity. It requires a coalition of partners working together to address and offer redress. We also want to make sure that the individuals that are involved in the work are those that are most impacted by the issue being addressed. And so it isn't simply a consultation, but those individuals are driving the solution and imagining what that solution is. Their voices are centered in how these inequities are being confronted. So I'll leave that up. All right, there we go. Now, for both Sun and Solidarity, these are the criteria that are being evaluated by our Community Advisory Committee. And again, a lot of what we're sharing is right there. Actually, everything that we're sharing right now is in the guidelines. So again, please just take a close look at the guidelines. Today, we want to make sure we just leave a lot of opportunity for questions. But these are the 5 criteria that are being used for the evaluation. So alignment, right? Is this proposal in alignment with the actual grant program that's being applied for? So again, if it's an emergency need or unexpected expense, does the proposal actually reflect that? It matches what Sun is asking for. Does the proposal actually focus on racial equity movement building? That's alignment for the Solidarity grant program. And then the CAC will be evaluating the impact. And when we talk about impact, you know, we're really trying to think about the solution that's being offered. You know, we'll be examining the inequity that's being in the case of Solidarity, for example. We're examining the inequity that's being outlined. The application asks you to talk about, you know, potential solutions, and the CAC will be evaluating whether or not, you know, the solutions being offered actually redress, you know, the injustice or the inequity that's being outlined in the proposal. Capacity, you know, again, looking at the grant application, there are opportunities to talk about who all is involved in the proposal, who all is involved in the work, what their roles are, what their background and expertise are. And, you know, when we talk about expertise, I think it's important to also underline that we aren't necessarily talking about, you know, kind of Western academic credentials. More than anything, we want to make sure that those who have the lived experience connected to these issues are involved. Power building and sharing, similar to capacity, who's involved and what their role is, and what is their proximity to the issue being addressed, and then care for resources. I think it's pretty obvious. The budget has to make sense, and there is an opportunity to provide some additional narrative if you want to explain any of the expenses. All right, next slide. All right, so we're going to pause right here and then just see if there are any. Oh, go ahead, Ebony.
Yeah, before you jump to questions, there are 2 things that I want to clarify.
Sure.
For the Sun grant program, for any of our grant programs, if you look at our program policies, you can apply as often as you need to. It is likely that you're only going to receive funding once per calendar year, particularly for Sun. So I just wanted to clarify that piece. And then the second thing about Sun is that we've been talking about like emergency or emergent or urgent needs. For some of you, you are aware that we had a grant program coming from our Community Emergency Relief Response Fund. And we tried to differentiate between sort of a kind of a Red Cross level emergency and some of the things that happen in our community suddenly. And so SURF is still a fund at the Community Foundation and is able to be deployed in truly community emergency, widespread emergency situations. But I wanted you guys to think about the sudden and urgent needs is not just about emergency things, but also emergent things that are time sensitive and time limited. And so I'm trying to think of an example. There's a community that is facing redevelopment in Charlottesville and may need to act really quickly in order to implement a strategy in order to galvanize their community members. That's happening in a really time sensitive and time limited manner. That's not an emergency where someone may or may not get hurt, but if they didn't receive that funding, it may have longstanding impacts on their community and is something that is, again, time sensitive, time limited. That would still be a reasonable request. I can't say that it would be guaranteed funding, but I do want to just name that I want folks to think about emergent needs. For example, last summer, we all, many of us are aware that there were a number of incidents of gun violence in the community that we wanted to, that some of our partners wanted to respond to in a very, again, time sensitive, time limited manner. That's one of those scenarios that might actually straddle both programs, where there might be a short term and a long term kind of intervention that folks may be seeking funding for. So there's some subtleties with those, and I just wanted to name them before we hop into questions specific to the programs. I'll turn it back over to Justin.
Thank you, Ebony. Yeah, that is an important distinction. And sometimes we use them interchangeably. We shouldn't. Emergency and emergent. Those are the things that SUN is hoping to address. And if there are other folks who just want to jump in, you can raise your hand and answer your question. All right, like I said, we tried to anticipate, and we've gotten some questions. I see two. June.
Hi, thank you so much for this session. I just had a couple of questions about the grant period, particularly for the Solidarity Grant, since it's on a rolling basis. What would be the grant period for each grant? And then my other question is whether funding could be used retroactively. So for instance, right, if something were funded for a calendar year, if it were for an existing program, am I assuming correctly that expenses prior to January 1st of the grant year would not be allowable?
Oh, I saw you getting ready to jump in.
Sure. So we have tried to move a little bit away from a defined grant period by us. We would that grant period is defined by the grantee in terms of how they're expecting to use the funds and to what purpose. In terms of retroactively, we will consider reimbursements up to 90 days before the approval of the grant.
That's
For larger sort of long-term multi-year grants, those are 99.99% of the time going to move into a design process where we will set up very specific sort of metrics as co-create those metrics. But for most of our grants, both SUN and Solidarity, it's like as the funds are dispersed, we then anticipate reporting and evaluation from that point. For SUN grants, reports are due once the funding has been fully utilized, and for solidarity, if that hasn't happened in a calendar year, or regardless of whether that's happened in a calendar year, there will be an annualized site visit evaluation of the project.
Thank you so much. This is really helpful.
Does that answer your question, June?
Absolutely, above and beyond. Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I just saw your question in the chat, Amel. The questions are solidarity grants just available for Alana-led organizations, or are Alana serving organizations also eligible? And the quick answer is Alana serving organizations are eligible, as long as the team or the project team or initiative team is reflective of the issue being addressed. And so we want to make sure that I'm trying to think of an example, but I don't want to give an example that's going to fit. I'm going to end up giving an example that's going to fit an organization that's on the call. But I think nearly every organization is going to be eligible. But what we're focusing on now is the work that's being done and who's leading that work. And so it could be a situation where an initiative that's within a non-Alana organization is being led by those who are most proximate to the issue.
Well, I think I do want to clarify that a little bit, Amel, just because we're not trying to, I think that we're trying to say several different things here and not create loopholes for organizations that don't necessarily fit the criteria. It is really and truly about being Alana-led first and foremost. And there are a number of sort of non-Alana-led organizations that will be eligible for the grant program because they have strong programmatic leadership in some areas. But in the grants, but I don't want to diminish what the point of this project is, and that is that there should be some synergy, right, in terms of who you are serving and then who is leading the work of that. And so we are commenting on that on some levels. And historically speaking, in Charlottesville, in our region in particular, oftentimes initiatives that are purported to be serving Black and Alana-led communities are not being led by those communities. And so this is speaking to that on some levels. And so I think that we have a wide array of resources available at the Community Foundation. Our discretionary resources are most limited. And if some of you who were at the grants update meeting could see very clearly where disparities lie in our region, across the region, not just in the urban ring, but in our rural communities as well. This is not to say that non-Alana-led organizations are not doing good work. But there is an opportunity, right, to be in solidarity with communities as opposed to doing for communities. And if people are struggling to figure out how to articulate that or what that means, then we are absolutely available to folks to walk alongside them, to be thinking about whether it's, from a capacity building and infrastructure standpoint, whether it's from an attitudinal standpoint, strategic planning standpoint, like what does that mean to actually be in solidarity with communities, not just to receive these funds, but because we believe that that is how change occurs in our community in a way that shares power and resources. So I can't remember, was that you, Amel, who asked that question? But I'm happy to go into that a little bit more deeply if folks are curious or have questions about how we're thinking about that. But I do want to be clear.
Thank you, Amel and Ebony. And then I see Rebecca Buckner.
While Rebecca is typing her response, one other thing that came up as Justin was talking that I want to reflect on is that I think for all of the grant programs, whether there's a limit to what you can ask for or not, I encourage folks to indicate what your full and total need is. Our discretionary resources are limited in general, but we are really keen to share your proposals with our fund holder partners as well. And so even if we're unable to fully fund it, on the discretionary side of things, having a clear understanding of what your actual need is will help us pitch it to potential co-funders who might want to join in on supporting your ideas. So you can use the optional budget narrative as a way to say, hey, we're asking for this amount, but really what we need is, is this. You can be creative with your application is what I'm saying. And just let us know the full extent of what it is that you're needing.
And I did see one question come into the chat about how much support and technical assistance does the foundation offer. And, that's why we shared that slide at the beginning showing our entire programs team, because we do want to make sure we provide as much support as needed to those, especially those who haven't applied to the foundation before. There are opportunities to submit non-paper applications. We can talk through that process with you. There are opportunities for video submissions, and so we tried our best to make this process as inclusive as possible. And I know historically we've even opened up our office for individuals to utilize our technology here and our computers. And so I think we will do everything we can except for write the application for you.
Justin, I see Rebecca's question came in to
Okay.
the chat. They are in the process of a capital campaign phase in Greene County to build a Lifeline Community and Youth Center. Could you talk about any grants that they might be eligible for capital campaigns?
Okay. Well, solidarity is available for capital campaigns. As we've said before, for those types of asks, we do encourage there be an initial conversation so we can get a better sense of exactly what is being asked when it comes to a particular capital project. But again, the solidarity program is unrestricted.
Yeah, and I'll just add that for capital campaigns, which is not something that we've funded historically from discretionary grant making, we'll have to have the strongest alignment to the movement building and transformative change sort of criteria. So it's really going to be project specific. And I would just say that for the committee that's evaluating those proposals, having a strong correlation between that and the movement building work is likely to be required. There's another question in the chat, I believe, about how to keep us up to date. It's a great question. Well, one of the things that I just want to name is maintaining relationships across teams here at the Community Foundation is really critical. So getting to know Katie Kling and Shakita Venable and Terrell White on our advancement team is really important as well. And so if you haven't met them or reached out to them before, please be sure to do so. We try to be out and about in the community as much as possible. So feel free to invite us to your events and keep us posted. Send us your annual reports. The other thing is that we learn a lot about our community and about your organizations through your grant applications themselves. And there are some really, there are some opportunities to upload any sort of documents, testimonials, one-sheeters, letters of support, all of those types of things to your application to round them out. That way we kind of have that information on file as well. So one of the things that we are working on is ensuring that we are present in throughout our service area. So we've been thinking about office hours or coffee hours or things like that out in the further counties. And so if you're interested or and maybe even hosting one of those or partnering with us in that way, that's something that we would be into as well. That way we can learn about your organization as well as folks in your communities that are doing similarly good work. So the sky's the limit there in terms of keeping us up to date on what you're up to, your needs and priorities. The other thing is that probably not this year, but next year we'll be doing another Center for Effective Philanthropy survey. I think that's one of the ways that we get a lot of information about sort of globally what folks are thinking about and needing in this space.
Then we'll take one more question, Daniel. Then we'll have Megan start part 2. Right, Daniel.
Megan, did you want to go ahead before I?
Yep, you can go ahead.
Okay, cool, awesome. Hi, everyone. So I have 2 questions. The first is, I know you guys mentioned kind of the idea of a multi-year grant, but also there is a possibility of doing like writing a grant every single year. Is there kind of a preference for you all as to like, if I have an idea, so like staffing, right? If I want to bring on a staff member, I'd rather put that in a multi-year grant than to kind of have it year by year, the person hoping that they're going to be hired for the next year. What does that look like?
Was that 2 questions?
That was the first of my questions.
Oh. Okay. I think multi-year would be the preference. If you already know this is a longer term need, go ahead and make it multi-year. I think it's most efficient both for a staff and a committee review standpoint, and I think for you as well.
Okay, awesome. That's what I was thinking, but I wanted to make sure because I guess I didn't realize you could apply every year. The second one is, what about, so my organization, like with 100 Black Men, we currently receive grants, both from like Bama Works or Dorothy Batten or places like that. If I were to submit a multi-year grant, should I take those into account? Do you know what I mean? Or should I, and say like, oh, well, we're expecting to get this money, so I shouldn't apply for it, or it's kind of like a weird position, right? I don't want to put all my eggs in one basket and hope that we get, this one big grant versus kind of doing the current piecemealing that we're applying and getting grants from a bunch of different organizations.
And I will say, receiving a grant from another program at the foundation or another fund at the foundation does not exclude you from this opportunity, either opportunities. So I think it's important to be transparent and say if you're expecting or if you're applying for additional grant programs, you won't be penalized for sharing that. I think sharing as much as possible to give as accurate a depiction of funding need is the most critical thing, even if that includes other CACF resources.
Awesome. And last question, I guess, kind of on that. Would there be a possibility, I know you had mentioned before about like maybe if we already have a relationship with a grant funder that's at CACF, the possibility, I guess, of like putting those 2 together or talking with the grant funder and saying, hey, they apply for the Solidarity Grant, would you be willing to roll in your funding into that grant, into kind of this project?
I'm looking at you, Ebony, although I think we might have some members of our donor relations team on the call.
Yeah, it's a good question, Daniel. I think that there have been times where I think that, what am I trying to say? I think that there are infinite opportunities for combining funding, and depending on your relationship with your fund, with another funder at CACF, who has a grantor that has a fund at CACF, I think it really just depends. One way that it can flow up from typically it's discretionary, sort of reaching out to kind of co-fund and towards donor relations. But one of the ways that it can flow in the opposite direction is through your letters of support. And it's an underutilized, I think, option on all of our applications, but especially when we're looking at folks say, for example, this is a non-Alana-led organization is applying for solidarity and that they have a strong project or program team that's putting it forward. Using letters of support to sort of vouch for that is something that could absolutely strengthen an initiative. You could also use letters of support from another donor to indicate a desire to fund, but either maybe they need a match or they're looking for community foundation buy-in in order to sort of commit. So I think that's one avenue. I'll also just go back to what Justin said at the very beginning. Like, if there's some level of nuance or complexity to your application as it relates to that, come talk to us first, and we can help you sort through like the best, sort of direction to take. And I can't emphasize that enough. Like, we're not guaranteeing funding, even if we tell you something is strong or not strong. But at the end of the day, we want to put the best applications in front of our committee. We're not trying to trip anyone up or, weed folks out. We really want good work to happen in our community and to be able to use the resources that we have available. So don't be afraid to come and chat with us and figure out the best way forward.
Yeah, this is Dan Sparks, 100 Black Men. I just wanted to highlight a point you mentioned, which covers the fact that you mentioned the process of a matching component where you're matching based on expanding your services. And I think that's what you were trying to articulate there on the matching side of your funding.
We weren't. Maybe Daniel was speaking to matching, but we're not requiring matching funds.
You're not, okay. Okay.
Hey, Justin. So this is Tanisha Hudson. I kind of just wanted to follow up to what was just asked by Daniel and then go back to Mr. Brown. And I hope everyone can hear me okay. So I would say that if we really want to be inclusive and fair across the board, we do have to accept that there's a lot of people that really don't understand the grant process, one. While we have this Alana grant that's supposed to be for African-American led organizations or African-American work about, what was formerly BIPOC communities. I think we also have to accept that there's a lot of people doing the work that really don't understand the grant process. So to kind of say that we want to put the best applications in front, that's going to be really hard for like organizations that's been doing the work, like Mr. Brown. I think that's been doing the work for a while, right, in the community, but hasn't really reached out to get any type of assistance or any type of grants. So I would say it would be beneficial maybe if there was some kind of, grant assistance for the newcomers. Some of us aren't new, some people are, but even some of us that have done it for a while, there's people that know this grant process in and out. Does that mean that they get an advantage over top of someone that's new? I mean, because that's what it sounds like almost. I think we need to be really clear on that.
Yeah, thanks, Tanisha. I appreciate that. I think that the first thing that I'll say is I should definitely qualify what I mean by best. And I don't mean like professionally polished, perfect grant applications. That's not necessarily what I mean at all, honestly. I think what I'm trying to say is that we want to ensure that the people who need the funding are getting in front of our community advisory committee, and that we're not trying to trip people up in our application. Like, we're saying, come and talk to us. If the application doesn't feel accessible, if it doesn't feel clear, we just want the information to get in front of our community advisory committee. So come talk to us, as opposed to, seeing the application, having a question and walking away. That's what I was trying to articulate in that statement. The second piece is that you're absolutely right. Not everyone has like a professional grant writer on team and understands our processes, which is why we're trying to do things like we're doing today, is so that people can ask those questions and feel comfortable or confident. That's one piece. The second piece is that we are trying to use all of our resources, not just our staff, but our community advisory committee, some of whom are on this call today, like Mr. Dean, who can tell you the extent to which our staff and team, including driving all the way out to Buckingham and, walking folks through either how to log into this system or typing in responses into the application or accepting, alternate kinds of ways of submitting applications. So we're trying to make it as accessible as possible, but we also recognize that our grant making in and of itself is an act and a test of that movement building, that we are trying something for the first time ourselves and are going to have to learn, right? Like we're gonna come out the gate. We just launched this program, and part of the Lunch and Learn experience is not just for you guys to hear from us, for us to hear from you as well about what isn't working. And so this issue came up also in the grant update meeting. And so one of the things that we've been trying to think about and test is that we had a number of volunteers come forward after the grant update meeting to say that they would be willing to be grant writing mentors for folks who haven't had that experience. And so we're trying to figure out ways to do some matchmaking around that. But I also just want to clarify again what I mean by best or a good application, because there is some mythology around what data has to be included and how polished or professional an application has to be. And we did some focus groups talking about this, particularly for Black and Alana-led organizations that really felt compelled to either hire a professional grant writer or ask a white person, frankly, to submit applications on their behalf because they thought that it would come off better. And at the end of the day, what we really just want to hear from folks is, what are y'all seeing in the community? What is it that you're planning to do about it? And what makes you well positioned to do that work? And so it's not just who this grant money is for, it's the entire process of how it's coming to us, what people are saying about it. We really want to hear this in people's own words. We don't need it to be jargony. We don't need all the gobbledygook. We don't need gratuitous, disingenuous equity language. We really just need people to talk about the good work that they're doing in the community and why they in particular are well positioned to do that work, and why does this have meaning for our region? How is this going to make things better? What are we trying to fix? And so I just want to actually strip down what it is that we consider to be best and good and what makes sense in the grant application. So don't feel the need to try to break out the thesaurus just to prove a point about work that many of you guys have been doing for years already. And so that's not what we're looking for exactly here. And if there's questions about that, come and talk to us. I will just say that the best grant applications we have received in the past couple of years have not come from professional grant writers. I just need to say that.
Thank you.
Melissa.
Hi, everyone. I'm the director of Creciendo Juntos, and I just wanted to share our testimony to reaffirm what Ebony has been saying. I'm new to the community, but also my team and I are really new to grant writing. And one thing I want to just uplift is that the CACF has been extremely helpful with being accessible. Their staff and just the past 2 site visits that we've had has been really easygoing, and it has relieved a lot of pressure from us because we were also under the impression that we had to be these expert writers and, technical writing. Some of it, it's not our strong suit for some of us. And so we were really nervous, but given that we have had such a not to say that the standards are lowered, but rather it has been a more of an engagement learning process versus here's our expectations. We expect you to meet them, and you're alone type of thing. So I do just want to uplift that, especially for those who are new to submitting grants, because we're definitely new, and it has been a challenge, but overall it has been a learning curve, and we're really appreciative of having funders like CACF to help us through that process and such. So that's all.
I just want to do a quick, an hour is never enough. I just want to do a quick little time chat because Megan has some slides about using our application system. And I just want to make sure that folks are able to access the system. And so I am curious if, just in the interest of time, if she can hone in on a couple of different slides, or yeah, I'm just curious if you guys can like put up your hands if anyone has had like trouble or questions about how to access the online system. So we can just determine like what she might focus on, or if we continue this programmatic kind of Q&A piece. Does everyone understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, I can also record that and send it out. I should only need 5 or 10 minutes, so I'm happy to record that after the meeting and send it out to anyone who's in attendance.
Okay. Let's go ahead and plan on that. Oh. Mr. Brown, you can go ahead and unmute if you have a question.
Yes, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I want to kind of clarify something that probably some folk may be aware of, but others may not. You have this mentality in the community where you have really all this rich experience where people have always applied for grants and always gotten the money. And then you have initiatives put forth like the one where a lot of new groups come to the community and they're finding success in getting funding. But I want to take you all the way back to the African American mindset about the census taker coming to the house, and folks say, don't trust the man, okay? And so there's a middle group, a core of us that, and I'm not necessarily talking about your foundation, but whether it's going to city council meetings or whether it's just going downtown to get money. And the big problem I've had, for example, is government funding has always come to Charlottesville and it got dispersed in Charlottesville. But what the powers that be would do would go to the community, say your community was getting new sidewalks and getting trees cut back and all kinds of things were happening in your community. And you didn't know that was part of money that came to the community, but somebody decided, oh, for your neighborhood, we'll go ahead and do that. And then they meet the requirement for having served all the citizens of the community, okay? So when you look at that middle group that says, you know what, there's a serious skepticism about whether people are real or not. And here's the biggest red flag, or shall I say concern. Everybody wants a business plan. Everybody wants a proposal. Everybody wants you to collect all of your ideas, put them on paper and send them in, okay? And you might get something, you might not. But here's what happened. It's like having something copyrighted or something. That is, if it wasn't copyrighted before and I show it to you or send it to you, then you can go use it in any way you can. So you have a group, particularly in the African American community, that says, I'm doing this, I've been doing it a long time, whatever. And then you do something and you write it down and you look across town and you see somebody doing the exact same thing, almost duplicate that you're doing, and they got funding for it. And you're like, wow, they did it again. So with your efforts, I think you have to keep in mind the skepticism that comes with, in particular, the African American community, of organizations being genuine about, letting us, helping you. Okay. And for that reason, that's why I asked the question, how do you build that confidence and trust and relationships beyond what we write on a piece of paper and beyond having the video chats and whatever? Because many of us are catching up with the technology of how to go online and bring everybody. And I'm calling, other collaborating people and say, are you aware of this grant seminar, this grant thing that's going on today? Because I'm not afraid, okay? Because I do what I do and have been doing it so long. But I think you really have to accept the fact that there is an absolute distrust in Charlottesville for the powers that be that control money and have always controlled money, that we're going to be robbed, okay? Or that we're going to come up on the short end. So I don't know how you validate and you, because you're dealing with the same issue. Submit your application, you might get a grant, you might not. So that's why I said you have to come out. The single thing that I think is most important, and I tell people all the time, is that money is available, but nobody's going to bring it to you, okay? Nobody's going to, hey, come over and tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you can get a grant for that, okay? So how do you bridge the gap between publicizing what you're doing or going over to tap someone on the shoulder and say, you're doing great work, how can we help?
I invite folks from the Community Advisory Committee and other folks in the programs team to chime in on this as well, because I think we all have our own unique perspectives on answering Reverend Brown's question. And the first thing I'll say is that, even though you weren't necessarily talking about the Community Foundation, I think it is okay to talk about the Community Foundation. We're aware of our, 50+ year history in the community and how recent these efforts may seem to folks, for sure. I think post 2017, the way that we've operated publicly is significantly different than the previous 40+ years in the Community Foundation's history. And that's something that is consistent with the field of philanthropy and community foundations in particular, but not a legacy that we want to endure for us. So I think it's okay for us to just acknowledge that you're hearing about us now because we're talking and out more now than we ever have been in the history of the Community Foundation, certainly post-pandemic, for sure. And so I just want to acknowledge that and say that this work, this stage that we're in is a direct response to what it is that you're naming, Mr. Brown. And so so that's one thing. The other thing is that we are a small team, and so we try to get out and there as much as we possibly can and cover, as wide a swath as possible. But one of the ways that we have really hoped to expand our capacity to be out there, and we actually do feel like it's a good idea to bring money to people and not just wait for them to come to us. So we are doing a lot of like, hey, what are you doing? And I'm curious and interested in what's going on in your work, and we'll continue to do so. But one thing is that we're also trying to use our Community Advisory Committee and that group not being fully representative, but definitely having representation on that group throughout our service area, including our rural counties, as well as having that group be folks that we feel like can serve as bridges. So it's not just up to our 3 or 4 person team, but we have a much broader group of ambassadors that can say, hey, this thing is happening. You need to get onto this webinar. This is important information about funding and that kind of thing. And that's about communications. And we also just added some staff that can help us about reaching out to folks, because even our own all those people that have received funding over and over again probably don't even see our Facebook and Instagram posts and all these other things. It's really hard for us to connect. But Jumana Altalal, who's on the call, is our new comms person, and is trying to help us reach folks. But that's only one part of what you're saying. That's how we connect to folks. That's not how folks come to see us as a trusted, trusting, trustworthy partner. And so I do feel good and proud about the way that our team has walked with people through this process in order to do some meaningful work in the community. But that's not to say that we don't have a lot more work to do. And at the end of the day, we see ourselves more as like community organizers than program managers in how we're thinking about spreading this message. Now, I just want to be clear. The more applications we get, the more competitive that funding is going to be. But I think that that's kind of what we call a good problem to have. And so, we're recognizing that. And so we actually, what we believe is that folks like you, Mr. Brown, like you are now, sort of, deputized in many ways to also be an ambassador about, what it is that you've learned today, who in your community may need this as well. And so that's one of the ways that we feel like growing this. And it's that movement building is a part of what we're trying to reflect in the Solidarity program in and of itself. And so we don't see ourselves as different or not subject to those same kinds of criteria that we put on the table. We're trying to have our actions be in alignment with what it is that we're saying, with what our values are. We are trying to have meaningful and positive impact on the community. We're trying to be a good shepherd and steward of the resources that are available to us. And we're trying to ensure that our team reflects the community and connects with the community. And so, again, those criteria that we've listed for your grant applications are the same ways that we're evaluating ourselves and the programs that we're putting out there. So I see Zion and Mr. Dean.
My name is Ziana Bryant. I'm on the CAC, and I just wanted to add to Ebony's comments about our work in like wanting to expand out into the community. So I think one thing that I would emphasize is that we've been having very real conversations in our CAC meetings. Like, we're very clear on the fact that like kind of the history around philanthropy locally, and also like we also know that we have our own kind of organizations that we're a part of and some of the work that we're doing. So I feel like, just from my perspective as one of the younger people in the group, that the CAC is very representative of like many facets within the community and folks doing many different forms of work, but all kind of aligning around this idea of like racial equity, expanding impact. So I think for me, I'm interested in seeing some of those groups that don't have, the professional grant writers get some funding. And I think that Ebony and the rest of the staff, Justin, Megan, Alex, they've been very clear that there are opportunities to like come to CACF's office and meet and like think about your proposal. And so I want to say that I feel like oftentimes those resources are underused as far as like, reaching out and talking about your proposal. And I know like for myself, I'm always nervous to like reach out to people, even when they say you can, but I think that they're very genuine in offering that support. So I hope that people take advantage of it. But even when we talked about how this application would roll out, and I hope I'm okay to say this, we talked about like looking for not just the glittery language and also, looking for the impact and the substance of these applications. So I just want to affirm that like we've already gotten our marching orders around that. They're not just saying that just to like sound good on this Zoom or like just at the grants update. Like we actually really went over that and talked about like some example applications. So I'm willing to like talk to folks as well and think about applications. But I know that I also would love to see young people represented in this new cycle of grant writing. So I hope to definitely connect with those groups as well. But yeah, like this is just me just affirming everything they've said, and also know that like I'm not going to co-sign something that I don't actually believe in. So just know that I'm being 100% honest with you all. But yeah, thank you CACF staff for doing this today.
Thanks, Sai. Mr. Dean, did you want to chat? You have to bring yourself off mute.
Mr. Dean, you always manage to mute yourself when you're ready to speak. We can't hear you.
Megan, can you unmute him?
How is this now?
Great.
Okay, I've been working with Charlottesville Area Community Foundation for about since 2007, and I'm from Buckingham. And we started out with the grant writer, and a third of our grant went to part paying the grant writer. So I decided to go to a class along with an assistant in Richmond to just find out how to write grants. And that was a wonderful investment. And then we started going to the outreach programs at the foundation, and those were very helpful because bits of information that was given, we were overlooking that. We had the information, but the matter of fact, to put it in there and make sense and to show statistically with data how you want to move. And so those things will help us. A lot of things we can help ourselves to do rather than asking other people to help. Now, I'm not a computer whiz, but one day I was writing a grant and I got stuck on the format. And I called up Charlottesville, and the young lady tried to talk me through it. And finally, she said, just send everything to me and I will input it and give you a confirmation before 5 o'clock that your grant is submitted. That's the kind of stuff that shows me that Charlottesville is reaching out there, and I'm not out here by myself. For example, on our site visits, each time we applied for Obama, we had a visitor, and initially it was the same visitor for a while until that visitor left, and he knew our program and what we were doing. So I'm saying all that to say this: you have to cultivate a relationship. It's not, and if you don't cultivate that relationship, it's going to be more difficult. The road will be rougher. But when you do that, you're driving on pavement. So I would suggest that was very helpful to me. And then also to reach out to other organizations to get matching funds. And one of the amazing things that happened was that in our initial stage, we reached out to other people. And that also influenced us to get grants from Charlottesville, as well as getting grants from other organizations. And I'm proud to say Charlottesville has supported Ellis Acres to a major degree, and I've tried to share that with other people in Buckingham because Buckingham was slow in applying for money. So it's a lot we can do ourselves. And when you get to know what Charlottesville is doing, just like this program there, they are doing a great job. And when they look at 7 counties they have to work with, it's not an easy task. And just in the recent years, when you look at the advertisement, the publications, it's reflective in that. And this program is a great program that we are doing now with the Sun and Solidarity Fund. It's all designed to stir us up and reach out there and get to where help is needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. So we're trying to respond to some questions in the chat as well. We are 15 minutes over, Megan.
Yeah, if you need to go, feel free to head out, hop off. We're going to be sending this recording out. this afternoon, but if you'd like to stay, I'm going to be going over 4 or 5 slides that show how to access our grantee portal, which we refer to as GLM. So if you need to go, thanks so much for joining us. If you can hang out for 5 minutes, I'll be quick. Let me share my screen. We'll get this going. Sorry, my name is Megan Donovan. I am the grants administrator here on the team, and I am the face and name behind the grants@cacfonline.org email. So if you should need any support, or if you have general questions, you can always start with me, and then I can forward that question along if needed. Okay, so I'm just going to show you a couple things about our new grantee portal. We launched the Grants Lifecycle Manager this summer with the intention to be both user-friendly, more user-friendly to grantees as well as staff and evaluators. And so far, the feedback is that yes, it is more user-friendly. It's more accessible, and we're really excited about sharing this with you. To access our Grants Lifecycle Manager GLM, you can start at our website, which is www.cacfonline.org. A couple of locations you'll see over here on the right under Login, there is a Grantees section. Under Grants and Resources, you'll also see our grantee portal linked a couple times there as well. Once you go to the GLM login page, it looks like this. A couple things I want to point out to you here. We have a couple support resources linked, which are a great place to start if you have general questions about navigating the application, logging in with our 2-factor authentication, or adding a collaborator to your grant application. So feel free to start there. You can always call or email me as well, and I'm happy to walk you through it. Some other features on this page, we have a forgot your password, which I'm sure you're all familiar with doing that. But if you're not sure if you created an account, if you submit forget your password and you don't get an email, that means that you can create a new account by pushing this button right here. From here, you'll get to this creating new account page, pretty general information about your organization, the website, the address, your user information. If you are not the executive director, they do ask for executive director name and contact information. And the only thing I want to point out to you here is that it does require that you put the EIN or tax ID in. And I want to point to the question in the chat was about fiscal sponsorship. So yes, we absolutely accept applications from organizations who are not 501c3, but we do require that you have a fiscal sponsor. If you do not have an EIN, you can write zeros there and proceed with the application. When you get to the fiscal sponsorship section in an application, that's where you'll input your fiscal sponsor's EIN. But you are always filling out the application from the perspective of you and your organization. And I'll just clarify again in the comments, it says to remind you all that if you are an organization that has a fiscal sponsor, your fiscal sponsor can also apply for a grant within the same year, the same cycle, even the same grant program. All right, moving on from here, the second time you log in, you'll be asked to add this 2-factor authentication. This is to keep both your information secure and our backend financial portal secure. We recommend a couple of these apps over here on the right. You will not need to pay for this app. If an app is asking you to enter your credit card or ask for payment, delete it and find something else that does not do so. You can download this both on your computer or your phone. So choose one of those. If you don't want to use your phone, you don't need to. You can use a browser. And this is one of the resources that was on our login page. So if you have trouble here, if you get caught up, or if you want to read that first, that can help you get through this page. But you only do this aspect once. You enter the access code after that when you log in. The apply page will look a little bit different every time you log in based on which grants are open, but there is an apply button. It'll pull up any grant that is listed on our portal, and it will let you know if it is open for application or not based on the deadline. So I want to point out here that you can preview any application that is in our system, both within this grantee portal. But know also that all of these applications are on our website, so you can always start there, look at the application before you log in if you wish. And then when you feel like you're ready to apply, go ahead and hit that apply button. It'll bring you to the first page. And you click through it just like you would any other internet-based application. A couple of features I'll point out to you quickly. Again, there's that apply button. If you want to get back to kind of the dashboard of which grants are available, you can start there. Organization history will capture any grants that your organization applies for moving forward. We do not have historical information in this portal, but the Community Foundation does have it in our other system, so you don't have to worry about that. This GLM allows for translation of the application itself. So if it would help you or some of your collaborators to see the question in a different language, that's an option there. And I mentioned this earlier, collaborating. So if you start an application, you need support from somebody, or you want someone to proof it before you submit it. If you start it and somebody else is finishing it, that's the button to look for. You'll submit their email address. They will get an email to create an account. And now this application is linked between the two of you. Quickly, I'll point out that at the bottom of every page, you can hit save, and that allows you to leave the application and return to it. So don't feel like you have to sit down and fill out the whole application in one day. My information is there at the bottom of the screen, and I mean it when I say, please reach out to me with any questions at all. I'm happy to sit next to you in a coffee shop if you need help kind of navigating the portal. We can talk by phone. You can text that number as well. And I just really want you all to feel supported. So I will end my screen share so I can see you now. And if you do have any questions about the portal itself, I'm happy to take those now. I do see one question in the chat that maybe Justin or Ebony can take about churches who have nonprofit programs, but not a 501c3 number. How would they deal with that question around the EIN? And I think that the answer is to have a fiscal sponsor.
Well, I was just going to hop in. You can apply as a religious entity without any issue. So whether you're a 501c3 or a nonprofit, our guidelines say we accept applications from 501c3 organizations, governmental or religious entities, or fiscally sponsored groups. So churches will fall under the religious entity.
Thank you.
And you would just use your regular EIN for that.
Are there any other questions related to, oh yes, Mr. Dean.
Reverend Brown, on the your identification number, you could also apply directly to IRS and get that number without getting the 501c3, and that number doesn't cost you anything. But if you get the 501c3, it's going to cost probably around $750 to $800. But you can get your tax identification number directly at no cost. And the IRS is very helpful on doing that. I don't have a number right offhand to give you, but if you Google it, it'll pop up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. Any other questions related to our grantee portal or today's Lunch and Learn at all? Okay, it was so wonderful to be here with you all. We really appreciate you joining us. Please do reach out with any questions, any comments that you may have. And we'd also invite you to be sure that you receive our newsletter, because that is our primary communication method right now to get news and updates out to you all. You can join our newsletter by visiting our website and looking for the program updates link. Yeah, we look forward to receiving your applications and working closely with you all. Goodbye.